Welcome back to Echoed Stories. Get comfortable. It's story time. Let's dive in.
My father died owing the bank $42,000. Or at least that was the number my stepmother, Brenda, screamed at me in the funeral home parking lot while I was trying to unlock my car door. She was waving an invoice for the casket like a weapon. I looked at her. Fake tan, fake nails, real grief masked by panic, and I told her the truth. I had $300 in my checking account and a credit card that was maxed out from buying a transmission for my Honda. Unless the funeral director accepted IOUs written on Dunkin' Donuts napkins, she was on her own. That conversation set the tone for the entire inheritance disaster. My dad wasn't a bad guy. He was just hard. He was a drywall contractor, self-employed since 1990. He worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. He came home covered in white dust that settled into the cracks of his skin so deep no shower could scrub it out. He drank cheap beer, smoked generic cigarettes, and fell asleep in front of the Weather Channel. We never went to Disney World. We never had new cars. The mantra of my childhood was simple and absolute. We're broke, don't ask. When he had the massive heart attack at 64, Brenda had been married to him for 5 years. She was high maintenance in a low budget way. She assumed contractors were like drug dealers, that they all had a secret stash of cash buried in the backyard. She spent the week before the funeral tearing the house apart looking for it. She found nothing, just bank statements showing overdraft fees and a life insurance policy that barely covered the remaining mortgage on their small, siding-peeling ranch house. Probate was a nightmare. Brenda fought for every crumb. She lawyered up to secure the house, which was underwater on the loan anyway. The newer F-150 pickup truck, the furniture, the TV, even his watch. What about the work van? I asked during the final mediation. The room went quiet. The van was a 2006 Ford Econoline. It was a monstrosity. The white paint was more gray grime than color. The passenger window was smashed and taped up with thick plastic sheeting. It had 280,000 miles on the odometer and smelled like a combination of old coffee, stale tobacco, and wet drywall mud. Brenda laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. You want that heap? Be my guest. It's leaking oil all over my driveway and the HOA is fining me daily. Take the tools in the garage, too. I'm listing the house next week and I don't want to pay for a dumpster. So that was my inheritance. A van that barely started and 50 cardboard boxes of rusted tools, old receipts, and half-empty buckets of joint compound. My boyfriend, Mike, was furious. He stood in the driveway as I coaxed the van's engine to life with a cloud of black smoke. She gets the house and you get a tetanus shot? He yelled over the engine noise. Maya, this is insulting. You should sue her for half the equity. With what money, Mike? I shouted back. Besides, I need a vehicle. My Honda is dead. I drove the van to our apartment complex. It was humiliating. My neighbors drive leases. I rolled up in a vehicle that looked like it belonged in a police evidence locker. I parked it in the back corner of the lot, hoping nobody would see me get out. The next Saturday, I started cleaning it out. I had to. The smell was making me gag every time I opened the door. I started with the front cab. It was a geological dig of my father's bad habits. Under the seats, I found fast food wrappers from 3 years ago, loose change, and a few faded receipts from Home Depot. I vacuumed the seats, kicking up a cloud of white dust that coated my throat. I wiped down the dashboard, scrubbing away layers of nicotine and grime until the gray plastic actually looked gray again. Then I moved to the back. It was chaos. Ladders, buckets, tangled orange extension cords that looked like snakes. I pulled everything out onto the pavement. I wanted to organize the tools, maybe sell the saws and drills on Craigslist to make rent. There was a heavy, locked toolbox bolted to the floor near the wheel well. Not a fancy one, just a battered, gray steel box covered in white paint splatter. Brenda hadn't given me a key. Of course she hadn't. I grabbed a crowbar from the pile of junk I just unloaded. Sorry, Dad, I muttered, looking at the sky. I jammed the crowbar under the lid. The metal screeched, bent, and finally popped open with a violent snap. I expected expensive power tools. Maybe a Milwaukee drill set I could get 200 bucks for. Instead, it was full of notebooks. Spiral-bound, college-ruled notebooks. Dozens of them. I picked one up. It was dated 1998. I opened it. It was a ledger, but not a tax ledger. It was handwritten messy, in my dad's blocky script. Asterisk job Johnson Kitchen. Quoted $4 500, materials $1 200, labor $800, net $2 500. I flipped through it, then I grabbed the next one. 2005, 2012, 2020. Every job he ever did was in here. I sat on the metal floor of the van and did some quick mental math. If these numbers were real, he wasn't making 30 grand a year like he told the IRS and my mom and Brenda and me. He was pulling in six figures. Easy, so where was it? He lived like a pauper. He drove this van. I looked back into the toolbox. At the bottom, under the notebooks, was a heavy PVC pipe capped at both ends. It looked like a piece of plumbing scrap. I almost tossed it in the trash pile, but when I lifted it, it rattled. It didn't sound like metal. It sounded like a dull thud. My hands started to shake. I used a pair of channel lock pliers to unscrew the cap. It was tight, sealed with pipe dope. When it finally gave way, I tilted the pipe. Rolls slid out. Tight, rubber-banded rolls of $20 bills. Dirty bills, old bills. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked around the parking lot. It was empty, but I felt like a spotlight was on me. I counted the rolls. $3,000. Okay, I whispered, my voice trembling. Okay, that helps. That pays off the credit card. But then I looked at the pile of junk on the sidewalk, really looked at it. Buckets of joint compound that looked dried out. Old paint cans, boxes of screws, the ladder rack on the roof. I looked at a 5-gallon bucket labeled drywall screws 3-inch. It was heavy, too heavy. I popped the lid. It was full of rusty screws. I dug my hand in. The screws bit into my skin, scratching me. About 4 inches down, my fingers hit something hard and smooth. Not metal, glass. I pulled. The screws shifted. I pulled out a pickle jar. It was wrapped in silver duct tape, but I could see through the bottom. Green. Inside the jar were hundreds, stacks of $100 bills. I stopped breathing. I literally forgot how to inhale. I looked around the parking lot again. Mrs. Higgins was walking her poodle across the street. A delivery truck drove by. Nobody was watching me. Nobody cared about the girl cleaning out a junk van. Panic set in. It wasn't joy. It was pure adrenaline-fueled paranoia. I scrambled. I pulled every bucket, every box, every loose tool back into the van. I threw them in with a crash, not caring if I broke anything. I slammed the back doors. I locked them. I jumped into the driver's seat and locked the front doors. I drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't do this in the parking lot. I drove 3 towns over to a self-service car wash bay, one of those secluded ones with high brick walls. I pulled into the bay, turned off the engine, and just sat there for 10 minutes shaking. Then I started the autopsy of my father's life. He hadn't trusted banks. He hadn't trusted wives. He barely trusted gravity. He was a child of poverty who made money and was terrified of losing it to alimony or taxes, so he hid it. In the only place nobody ever looked, work, I opened everything. The dried up cans of paint, some were actually dried paint. Others had false bottoms made of cardboard discs, with Ziploc bags of cash underneath. The shop vac in the corner, the filter was gone. The canister was stuffed with silver coins, literal silver eagles and old quarters dating back to the 60s. The hollow metal rails of the ladder rack on top of the van, I found plastic end caps that looked removable. I stood on the tire to reach them. I popped one off. A long, thin plastic tube slid out. More 20s, more hundreds. I spent 4 hours in that car wash bay. I was sweating, covered in drywall dust, looking like a maniac. I stacked the cash on the passenger seat. It smelled like mildew and gypsum. I counted, then I recounted. Then I counted a third time because my brain refused to accept the number. It wasn't millions. It wasn't retire on a yacht money. It was $182,400 and about 15 pounds of silver bullion. For a rich person, that's a luxury car. For me, that's a life. That's my student loans paid off. That's a down payment on a house that doesn't smell like cigarettes. That's freedom from the panic I feel every time the rent is due. My phone buzzed on the dashboard. It was Brenda. I stared at the screen. The name flashed, Brenda stepmom. I picked it up. Maya, she said. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the tone she used when she wanted a favor. Listen, honey, I was looking through the garage and I realized I might have given you the wrong box of receipts. The accountant needs them for the final tax filing. And I think your dad's old toolbox was in the van. I have a buyer for the tools. A guy called, said he'd give me $50 for the lot. My stomach dropped. She didn't know about the cash. She couldn't, but she was sniffing around. She realized the junk might have value, or maybe she just wanted to control one last thing. She wanted the $50. Even with the house and the truck, she wanted the $50. I looked at the pile of cash on the seat next to me. The van is empty, Brenda, I lied. My voice didn't shake. It was scary how steady it was. I took everything to the dump this morning. The tools were rusted solid. Nobody would buy them. Silence on the other end. You threw them away? Her voice went shrill. The mask slipped. Without asking me, that was estate property. You had no right? You told me to take it, I interrupted. You said, and I quote, I don't want to pay for a dumpster. I saved you money, Brenda. You should be thanking me. You little ungrateful. I hung up. Then I blocked her number. I put the cash into 3 black trash bags. I hid them under the spare tire. I drove to a bank, not the one in town where everyone knows my dad, a bank 2 towns over. I rented the largest safety deposit box they had. Walking into that vault with a trash bag inside my backpack was the longest walk of my life. I expected alarms. I expected the teller to tackle me, but she just smiled and asked about the weather. I didn't deposit the cash. You can't deposit that much without triggering federal reports, and I'm not explaining this to the IRS. Not yet. I put the cash in the box. I put the silver in the box. Then I went back to the van. I drove it to a we buy junk cars lot. What'll you give me for it? I asked the guy. He looked at the rust, the smashed window. He kicked the tire. $500, assuming it starts. Sold, I said. I took the check. I walked home. It took me an hour, but the air felt good. I kept one thing, one of the notebooks, the last one. On the last page, my dad had written something. It wasn't numbers. It was a note written in Sharpie. Asterisk, Brenda will want the house. Let her have the mortgage. The van is for Maya. She's the only one who ever helped me carry the drywall. Don't spend it all in one place, kid. He knew. The grumpy, silent, cheap old man knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't leave me a fortune. He left me a test. He left me the dirty work, knowing Brenda wouldn't touch it because she was too afraid of getting her fake nails dirty. I bought a bottle of wine that night. the expensive kind, $20. Mike asked if I was celebrating getting rid of the death trap van. Yeah, I said, pouring a glass and watching the liquid swirl. Something like that. I still work at the diner. I still drive my Honda. Brenda is still posting on Facebook about how hard it is to manage the estate. But when customers are rude to me, or when the manager yells about overtime, I just smile. I touch the key to the safety deposit box on my necklace. They see a broke waitress. I see a woman who knows exactly what her time is worth. And it's a hell of a lot more than minimum wage.